it is interesting seeing a kind of trend in more patients coming in, having tried to do stuff themselves, and so CBD is becoming a
yeah, I was going to ask. It's the next big.
Say, yeah, that they've used CBD, or they've been advised to use CBD products, and so yeah, it's an interesting one. I think we probably won't see a slowing down of that anytime soon, and there'll be other things that get added to it, I imagine.
Yeah, and I mean, even before supplements, I mean, with your experience in working in sport and also visiting, various clinics around the world, from a nutrition, sleep, some of these recovery modalities, again, there's certain themes that tend to crop up of modalities that can help people across the board, or that tend to be emphasized.
I don't think there's a consistent approach that I've seen, which probably suggests that there's no one treatment which is hitting the sweet spot in terms of affecting it. I mean, definitely inquiring around sleep, because often athletes won't necessarily report that. So making sure that we inquire, how is sleep, and has sleep become a problem, and providing a lot of education around what these symptoms mean, and it's important that they're taken seriously, but not that they kind of become they take over your life.
For sure.
Keeping a kind of balance in terms of what you're doing, and it's not bad for you to start doing aerobic exercise that doesn't provoke your symptoms. I think those are probably the kind of consistent themes. I mean, I've come across a few interesting little bits in terms of what I've read. So Bluelight, in terms of an aid to managing kind of sleep symptoms in athletes after concussion, has been an interesting one. And then one that I've a couple of different people have asked me about is exogenous ketones, or ketogenic diet. In the management of concussion. And it's an when I looked about a year ago at what was out there, and most of what I could find was from rat models,
animal models
that kind of suggested. So obviously, like there's some problems with rat models of concussion, because rats don't have to remember a line out call and
right. Sure. So, at least we're not sure they don't.
Yeah, at least I don't think they do. Yeah. So you've got some kind of issues there, but basically it looked like some studies were reporting that exogenous ketones were reducing the magnitude of damage in the brain. Other studies were showing that was kind of dependent on the age of the rat. So some rats who were more mature were doing worse off the back of that treatment, and the relationship with insulin levels seemed to be an important factor in determining whether they got benefit from it or not. So it all looked a little bit murky, and there wasn't a clear path through to say this is the optimal strategy. But I know I've met a couple of athletes who have decided to try it, and I think the difficulty is that initially, if you've tried to adopt a ketogenic diet, you do feel pretty rotten initially.
It's a challenge,
and I think that's. So you imagine that, and also being concussed, and they felt pretty bad. But in terms of the physiology behind it, it's an interesting idea, and a bit of a watch this space in terms of. I believe there are some human studies ongoing that haven't reported their results yet to look at that.
Yeah. But I guess potential role for exogenous ketones and things like that you wouldn't have to adopt a diet to be able to achieve whatever potential benefits could be. It could be something. And in terms of creatine, have you seen much around? We know it can impact some of the glutamate excitotoxicity and some of that calcium influx. There's been a few small studies done, but I'm not sure if that's what the body of knowledge really is there on creatine and concussion.
Yeah. So just as a kind of follow up to that ketones point, sorry.
Absolutely,
Mark. But just as a follow on to that, it's one of the things around the kind of physiological concept to it is that the cells in the brain go through a period of metabolic shutdown where they're not able to manage glucose because of the ionic instability that's occurred, and so therefore, if you give an alternative fuel source and cells in the brain can use glucose or ketones, then will that help to get things going a bit quicker and stimulate recovery? And I think one sort of note of caution to sound is just that I don't think we know whether that's a protective process or not.
Exactly. Yeah.
So potentially the metabolic shutdown may actually be a protective process. And I don't know if it makes sense as an analogy, but if you've got like faulty wiring in your house, then you want to wait until the faulty wiring is repaired before you put like a generator through it and set fire to the whole thing. But
yeah, that's a good analogy.
Something that's in my mind as a little addition to it. But
nice.
So sorry, in terms of creatine, I haven't actually come across a lot out there, but possibly that might be because in our study group, we're pretty sure that everyone was taking creatine anyway.
Yeah.
Just because of the setting. So yeah, no, I haven't come across too much about that, but it is interesting.
Yeah, that one becomes interesting in sort of younger athletes because we see, especially sports like ice hockey, you get a, one 11 or 12-year-old when they start to body check that's, 5'10" and 170 pounds, and another 11-year-old who's 5'3" and 110 pounds. And so with younger athletes, and taking creatine is obviously something that a lot of coaches and parents, still wonder about the safety effects, despite, really robust, in adults, robust, research. But I mean, this is potentially where there could be a benefit, a protective benefit. But again, not a lot of research done in that cohort.
Yeah, and I think in terms of the general mood and feel, there seems to be a real shift towards law changes and trying to modify the game in youth sport to minimize the occurrence of concussion. Mm-hmm. So you've seen efforts to get rid of body checking, efforts to limit heading in soccer, some efforts to try and look at modifying the rules in youth rugby in France to see whether that will reduce the rate of concussion injuries. So and I think in large part it's because, just like you said, you've got those imbalance issues, chronological age and
biological age are moving at different speeds, aren't they?
Yeah, and like within a lovely phrase that a youth rugby coach said to me. He was like, it's biological age, rate of force development, those things, but it's also like propensity for violence. There's a big variation in in behaviour.
Yeah, absolutely.
Between kids in the same age bracket.
Absolutely. Patrick, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time out today and sharing your work and your insights. Leaving this discussion off here in terms of the evolution of your research in this area, or the research as a whole, where do you see things going with this sort of acute diagnosis and the ability to be able to pick these things up, on the pitch?
Yeah, I think that biomarkers and the technology like that is definitely coming. We're getting better looks at which biomarkers are going to be relevant and useful, and also the technology to support that being point of care is coming as well. I think at the elite end it's probably going to look like integrating that with existing clinical tools, and at the kind of amateur end, hopefully it's going to be a sort of standalone thing that can be used to make the sport a lot safer. So I think that's where diagnosis is going, and the exciting thing is that with each biomarker that we evaluate and that we understand the role and the function of, we get a better idea about what the pathology is in terms of concussion and sport concussion, and that allows us then to start to think about, okay, well, can we get more effective treatments and more effective monitoring of when people are going to be safe to return? So I'd say, if diagnosis isn't your bag, don't throw out biomarkers because they could be really exciting for other applications in the field.